Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Accessibility and Inclusivity, What Marketers Need to Know. So firstly, I believe that we've got people joining us from across the world. So good morning, good afternoon. Make sure you say hello in the chat box. Let us know where you're tuning in from, what the weather's like. I'm in Manchester in the UK. It was glorious this morning and it is now typical Manchester, grey and rainy. So yeah, let us know. Hopefully the weather's better where you are. We're so excited to have you join us today to talk about this important topic. We've got a really jam-packed panel session in store for you. Hopefully you come away feeling inspired and ready to put our actionable takeaways to good use. For brands, accessibility in marketing is absolutely vital. It's a key step towards inclusivity, and this is something that we should all be striving for, not only because it benefits your brand and your commercial goals, but also just because it's the right thing to do. When we talk about accessible and inclusive marketing, we are, of course, referring to the practice of making campaigns, materials, strategy, social media content accessible to everybody. Our goal should be to remove all barriers to ensure that everyone has equal and easy access to our brands, regardless of their background or ability. So that's enough from me. We're going to get started with today's session. We're joined today by Elijah, Chloe, and Teddy for today's panel. I'll let them properly introduce themselves in just a second, but just a quick agenda before we kick off. So the main session today is about 50 minutes. It's a panel with our panelists, and we will finish off with an audience Q&A. Any questions for our panelists, please just pop them in the Q&A box so we don't miss them. Hopefully we'll get round to everything. If we don't, we will get in touch with you after the session. But yeah, just keep those questions coming throughout and we will try and get around to as many of them as possible. So let's get started, panelists. I'm just going to get you to quickly introduce yourselves, as I said. So who you are, where you're from, where you're tuning in from, who you work for, all of that stuff. I'm just going to go around my screen. So Chloe, do you want to kick us off?
So I'm Chloe Smith. I'm a strategic SEO lead at Blue Array, as well as co-founder of the LGBT SEOs community. I've been in SEO for about 5 years, ranging from everything from technical to content to accessibility, and love talking about accessibility and inclusivity. I'm based in Reading. It is also incredibly great here. That's your weather update.
Thank you very much. Teddy, what about you?
Hi everyone, my name is Teddy Tostanowski, she, her pronouns. I'm calling in from Fort Collins, Colorado. I am the senior social and digital strategist for the president at Colorado State University. And for the past 6-7 years, I've been working in higher education social media at UC Berkeley, UC Davis, focusing on creating more inclusive social media for students in higher education. And I also love talking about accessibility and inclusivity. So really happy to be here.
Thank you. Happy to have you here. Elijah, what about you?
Everyone, I'm Elijah. I use he, him pronouns, and I was raised in Southern California, and last fall, I moved up north to study architecture at the University of California, Berkeley. And I'm excited to give my take on accessibility and inclusivity today from the Gen Z perspective.
Thank you so much. We've got so many great names on the screen, so thank you so much everyone for joining us. So a couple of quick fire questions before we really dive into the juicy stuff. This is just to warm our panelists up and also obviously to warm our audience up. So again, I'll probably just go around the same order that's on my screen. So Chloe, first of all, what does accessibility and inclusivity mean to you?
As someone who is disabled, accessibility is being able to access content regardless of your ability. For me, as someone who has a physical disability, who uses a walking stick a lot of the time with the hand that they write with, trying to use a mobile phone and a poorly optimized website is incredibly difficult. I'm also queer, so having that kind of worldview means that I just want information to be accessible to everyone across the world. And a big part of that is disabled people.
So much. And Teddy, same question to you. What does accessibility and inclusivity mean?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I think working so much with students in college and being asked as a marketer and communicator to, create campaigns and different things for this group, I learned very quickly in my time that a general approach wasn't it wasn't ever going to work. And so it's become very important to me from both accessibility and inclusivity to make sure that everything that I'm doing is reaching the people in the most inclusive way that they're feeling included. And it's just been something that I have cared about for a while now. I'm also in the queer camp, and so the inclusivity piece of it is also personally very important to me. And so just making sure that everything that I'm doing, you know, is making everything online better for the people that are trying to consume the content. So.
Thank you. And Elijah, what about you? What does accessibility and inclusivity mean to you?
Me, I'd say accessibility and inclusivity are at the cornerstones of civic duty. And I believe that it's our obligation as citizens to recognize a landscape marked by historical disparities and to ensure that everyone has equal opportunities today to succeed.
Thank you so much. Some absolutely cracking answers there. So thank you, everyone. Elijah, we'll stick with you as we continue on our quick fire round. Why is accessibility and inclusivity important when it comes to engaging Gen Z or your generation, do you think? You might be on mute. I'll go to Chloe whilst you're sorting that out. Chloe, do you want to pick that one up? Why is it important when you're engaging Gen Z?
I think it's important to remember as like Gen Z are very much becoming working age adults at this point. I'm a Gen Z millennial cusper, so very much sit kind of straddling the two camps. But the buying power of Gen Z is enormous, and it's incredibly clear that social issues affect us/them, depending on if I assign myself within that group or not, quite a lot. So it's incredibly important to make sure that you're not alienating your users by doing something that A, they disagree with, or B, they can't use.
Thank you so much, and thank you for speedily picking that one up again. Teddy, what about you? Why is it important when engaging Gen Z?
Yeah, I think Chloe hit on most of what I was going to say, but Gen Z, you know, having worked with a lot of them over the years, it's, you know, they're drawing a line in the sand when it comes to, you know, things being inclusive and, you know, having diverse environments. They're saying no to jobs if leadership isn't diverse. They're asking the hard questions, and I think it's really important for brands to take note of that and prioritize it. And you know, they are a big buying power that, you know, if you don't do that, then you're basically saying I don't want you as a customer, and you know, that's lost profits for you if that's what you care most about. So I think, you know, really digging into that side of what Gen Z is looking for. But if Elijah's there, I feel like his perspective is going to be the best out of all of these answers.
Thank you. And we will come back. You made an interesting point about the Gen Z might not apply to work for a company or be interested in working for a company if they don't have a diverse board, for example. And we will touch on that later. That's a really good point. So thank you. Elijah, are you back with us? I can't hear you, I'm afraid. Don't worry. We will come back to you. Our tech team will sort you out in the background. We've got a few questions for Chloe and Teddy to kick us off, so you've got some time, Elijah, some flexibility, so don't worry about that. So that is the quick fire section over with. Thank you very much. Chloe and Teddy, a couple of questions for you. So Chloe, we'll go to you first. Aside from it being the right thing to do, how does accessibility benefit brands, do you think?
So one thing we're seeing in the SEO space is that best practice SEO is very much becoming more and more aligned with best practice web accessibility. From anything from making sure that your links have optimized anchor text so that people with screen readers can understand what the page is that's being linked to having your alt attributes set up, because those also help your images rank in image search but describe the images to a person using a screen reader. That has the potential to have an enormous impact on a brand's reach via organic search. Just by keeping to those best practices, it means that you've got the potential to rank better on Google search result pages in organic results instead of having to pay for the ads, which then reduces your paid ad spend. And you've also then got the capacity to reach more users. Typically, the more you kind of focus on best practice SEO or best practice accessibility, your reach is going to grow naturally, just because you are targeting the things that are like aligned with your users and what they need, and then also giving them what they need in the easiest format. You're not making them jump through hoops to access that information.
Thank you. I mean, from everything, we all knew this, to be fair, before starting, but it's an absolute, there's no question about it, is there? It's something that it benefits everyone in every single way possible. Those are some great examples. Thank you very much. Teddy, what about you? Why do you believe that, or how do you believe that accessibility benefits brands?
Yeah, I think I'm going to focus on, so when you make things that more accessible and inclusive, it's actually better for everybody within society. There's a lot of research out there, and research that I've done myself, that when you're adding captions, you know, if there's captions on this video today, like, it's helping everybody understand content better, and that helps with getting messages across. If you're working in marketing and communications and social media, it's people aren't going to say, if you're choosing, you know, how do I say this? If it's never going to harm the rest of society by being accessible. And that is really important. You know, alt text isn't, you know, it's only going to make it better. Image descriptions and Instagram captions only going to give the ability for everybody to gain more context. And I think that that is something that brands really need to pay attention to, is that you have, you know, accessibility is really important for those who need it, but it's also a tool and a way to communicate better with those that don't need it. And I think that just makes it that much more important and usable and when you're creating communications.
Thank you so much. And we're all nodding, and I'm sure everyone watching is going like this as well. We're only 10 minutes in and we've already got loads of good stuff, so thank you so much. So following on from that, you know, we know it's the right thing to do. We know everyone benefits, but what are some of the key challenges that businesses commonly encounter when they're trying to integrate accessibility into their strategies? Chloe, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the biggest thing that I see agency side trying to get clients to kind of implement stuff that's best practice for accessibility is buy-in. A lot of people want a number attributed to what implementing that stuff can give them. And it's kind of hard to judge if they don't have the right tracking in place on their websites, because then you're losing information like how many purchases are abandoned because of a certain issue. How many people are we missing by not targeting them in the right way? So that's the big one. The other one is time. Particularly if we take on a new client at Blu-ray and we audit their website, and in the technical audit we surface images that don't have descriptions, the big issue with that is usually it's hundreds or thousands. So then they're looking at, how are we going to implement this in a way that doesn't then take our resource away from other things that will make more money? So it's then trying to justify that it's not just the fact that it's going to make you money now, it's going to just make your information more organized, more accessible, and then you're going to end up finding that you might not see that these increased purchases are from people using screen readers or assistive tech to browse the web, but they probably will be. It's often the harder challenge to try and attribute a number to that. And in the corporate world, they like the numbers. Yeah, it's fun.
So following on from that, and I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here, and Teddy, I will ask this question to you as well in just a second. For those startups out there, for example, who are just kind of getting to grips with everything, what would you suggest they do right from the off so they don't catch themselves in 10 years and realize they've got loads of backtracking to do?
Invest in it early. Either educate yourself if you are a one-person team, or invest in bringing on a consultant. That could be an accessibility consultant. It could be someone like me who has a specific marketing focus that benefits from accessibility. But getting that help early on is going to be the key to success there.
Great advice. Thank you so much. Teddy, key challenges that you think businesses encounter when they're trying to integrate accessibility?
Sure. So I thinking about this from like more of like if you're a social media manager or more of like that individual contributor, I think that, Chloe nailed it with buy-in from leadership. And education from the standpoint that if you've never done it, then it becomes really hard. It's really scary to implement these things. And I think that that is a challenge. If you've never done it, you don't have anyone to look up to, then, you're venturing into a new territory and, you don't want any backlash. You don't want to get it wrong. I think that that is a challenge. The other thing I want to talk about is our tools and platforms that we're using. So when you're thinking about posting on social media, most of the platforms have some sort of accessibility features built into them. Like you can put alt text on Instagram, you can do alt text on Twitter or X, YouTube, you can upload caption files. There can be more. I think that if you're trying to be truly accessible, there can be more of those things built into the platforms, tools like Sprout Social. It's always an option. In my opinion, I think that some of those should be required before you're even allowed to post to social media. And I think that that would actually solve a lot of the accessibility problems that we're having online. And then the final thing Chloe hit on is definitely bandwidth and time. It takes extra time. If you haven't built it into your process, then it becomes an afterthought. And so my suggestion there is to just build those things as you're creating content, and do it like a little bit at a time. So those are the 3 challenges that I've really seen and encountered myself.
Your point on not wanting to get things wrong actually really resonated with me. I was on a very similar webinar a couple of years ago, and it was all generalist marketers, and someone was like, Chloe, you're an SEO, you must be really good at your alt text on your Twitter images. And I was like, actually, I'd never thought about it. And at that point, I was like, Jesus Christ, why hadn't I? Like, it's such a very easy thing to do, especially like if you've got an iPhone and you're posting something that's got text in it, go to your camera roll and just highlight the text and paste it. Like, it's actually such a very simple step that takes like 30 seconds. It's great.
And that's a really nice anecdote because it kind of proves that not everyone's perfect and we don't all get it right. And it's no one was blaming, you weren't sort of criticized for that. You just kind of took that and ran with it and look where we are. So yeah, thank you for that one. Elijah, I'm just going to circle back to you, asking what accessibility and inclusivity, why it's important when it comes to engaging your generation. Are you all up to speed? Can we hear you? We can't hear you, I'm afraid. Do not worry, these things happen. This is the nature of a live webinar. We've got another couple of questions to go before we come back to you, so keep working in the background with our tech team. So Chloe and Teddy, you're very much in the hot seat today, so thank you very much, both of you. So Teddy, we'll go to you first for this one. Could you share insights, please, on how businesses can involve customers in their accessibility strategies?
I think that it's finding out what your customers need from both an accessibility and an inclusivity standpoint. I know marketers are doing focus groups. I don't know how often these questions are getting asked, but I don't ever want us to like put it on our customers or our, viewership of it's your job to help us with accessibility and inclusivity, but asking those questions. And if they're willing to tell you, then listening, actively implementing what they're telling you as well. So that's my bit for that answer.
Thank you so much. And Chloe, what about you? How can businesses involve customers?
I think you can talk to your customer sales teams, anyone who interacts with your customers on a regular basis. When we think about like putting FAQs on a website, some people's top tip is talking to those people who hear the complaints, because that's probably the best way to action stuff. If you've got the ability to talk directly to your customers, even if it is taking a segment of them and just asking them like 4 or 5 questions, like how easy did you find it to browse our website today? Did you find what you were looking for? If no, what were you looking for? Why couldn't you find it? Having those very simple conversations can tell you a lot about the things you're missing. And like we all know, if you're very close to something, it's very easy to go blind to the smaller issues. So definitely asking people who aren't as involved in the detail to kind of have a look at what's missing and build on that.
just sort of building on what you two have just said there, and I'm definitely, again, getting ahead of myself, but everything just links in so nicely. And Chloe, you touched on it earlier as well. Having these focus groups, or whatever you want to call them, listening to feedback and acting on it, that obviously takes resource from internal teams. That takes time. It might take money. How can we get buy-in from senior leaders who may be a bit reluctant to, let employees take that time or use money to go about finding that information? Chloe, do you want to answer that one first?
Yeah, sure. Coming from an agency perspective and thinking about how accessibility aligns to SEO, my big thing is thinking about the impact that implementing the things that come under both umbrellas can have on a website. So for us, usually that's like generating forecasts on the increased amount of traffic that might go to their website if they implement X, Y, and Z. And from that, you can take conversion data and put it's relatively rough and ready, but some general idea of the number, like the money that you could have. And I do not like that we have to justify everything with how much money someone's going to make from doing those things. Really, it should just be done anyway. But the nature of business a lot of the time is that you do have to surface those things. So my big thing is always always putting a number to something. That, and then almost appealing to the human side as well. So if, for example, that someone struggles with a particular thing, it'd be like, right, okay, so if a good example of accessibility on a website is buttons being too close together, because it's not accessible to people with motor difficulties. So if we separate those out, that's just going to make it a lot easier to use the website. And that benefits everyone, not just people who can't press on a particular button because it's next to another one.
That's so interesting. Thank you. And when you mentioned about the fact that it's a shame we almost have to have these discussions. Mm-hmm. It's not to be rude to either of you, but it's a shame that we're having to have this conversation in the first place. In an ideal world, we won't have to have these conversations because this will all, Teddy, like you said, there'll be things we have to do, and we won't even think about the fact that we have to do them. So leading on from that, Teddy, how, in your experience, can we convince senior leaders and senior teams to buy into this accessibility?
Yeah. So, I think Chloe's answer with providing the numbers is always, a great way to communicate effectively with your leadership. The way that I've done it is always coming in with a plan. I think that from an individual contributor standpoint, there's always being able to explain that it's the right thing to do. Working in higher education, there's always a principles of community, statement, your mission statements, all of that you can tie being accessible and inclusive back to core values of most any company. And that is something that I have leaned on heavily as I have helped make these transitions. In some states here in the United States, it's actually the law if you're a government agency. So that's something that I've also really looked into. Everything that comes out of, a government institution has to be accessible. And so that's just another thing that resonates with some of the leadership that I've worked with. And then, having all of that plan going into those conversations, outlining all of the data, the numbers, that can really help. And I think that part of going back to the conversation of focus groups and, having the bandwidth to go and have these conversations with your customers, it's also coming up with, this is how we're going to integrate it. In the first place, you're doing focus groups for other reasons too, right? Combine those, integrate questions on accessibility or inclusivity and all those other different steps that you're doing. It doesn't have to be a lot, but you're still going to gain a lot of those insights that you need, and explaining, it's not going to take away from my daily work or our overall production. The more that you integrate, the less that it's going to do that. So, that's what I have there.
Great advice. Thank you both. And hopefully everyone watching will, as I said at the beginning, have there's lots of actionable takeaways to take away from this session. So thank you so much. So the next question, we're going to take a little look at some brands who are getting it right. So I'd love it if you could provide me with an example of a brand who has got accessibility bang on, they're doing a really good job. Chloe, would you like to go first?
Absolutely pains me to say this, but the UK government website, it is the top tier example for good accessibility. They have, or at least had, a very dedicated content design team in particular, whose entire job was just making sure that all of this governmental information was not just accessible, but also in a format that anyone can read. Like the average reading age in the UK ranges from 9 to 12 years old. So making sure that everything is written plainly and simply, that is something that I send to clients all the time. Does pain me, but they do it really, really well.
Thank you. It's a great example. Thank you so much. Elijah, can you hear us and can we hear you?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Great news. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your patience and fiddling around the background. So I'll ask you a couple of questions just whilst we've got you. And Teddy, I will, of course, come to you in just a second. So Elijah, we'll just nip back to the first question that I asked you. Why is accessibility and inclusivity important when it comes to engaging your generation?
I would say it's important for companies to adapt to lowering attention spans of this generation by presenting information in a concise and comprehensible format. Because with the introduction of things like TikTok and other short forms of content, generally this generation has lowering attention spans. So with Gen Z poised to shape the future, equipping them with the necessary tools to actualize their vision will lessen the burden on their shoulders.
Thank you so much. And that kind of links perfectly to Chloe, what you were saying it all links perfectly. So thank you so much. Elijah, on that, could you give us an example of a brand who's getting accessibility right, in your opinion?
I would say YouTube is starting to head it in the right direction. Me personally, I use YouTube a lot, and I find that they're starting to make subtitles more accessible for those that are watching the video, and that's just one of many ways that you can try to make your brand more accessible.
Thank you. And we've mentioned on previous webinars that YouTube is kind of the big thing for Gen Z. So yeah, the fact that they're leading the way is obviously absolutely brilliant. Teddy, what about you? Any brands that stick out for you?
Yeah, so two brands that do stick out. NASA is exceptional at their alt text and their image descriptions, and they also have, none of their videos don't have burned in captions, which is great across all of their platforms. When I'm looking at a brand getting accessibility right, it's across the whole social media ecosystem, not in just one place, and they're doing it exceptionally everywhere. There's brands that are doing it really well, but it tends to be the individuals out there that do have a disability that are talking about it and providing tips for the rest of us. Holly Took, Life of a Blind Girl, and she works at the Royal Institute of Blind People there in the UK, I believe. Her LinkedIn and her blog are places that I go all the time to just to learn about things, and she's doing accessibility really well. So looking into those people, because they're on the ground creating that most accessible content out there that you can apply to your brands.
Amazing, thank you. And Chloe, are there any LinkedIn influencers out there who catch your attention and are doing a really good job at this sort of thing?
So LinkedIn is tricky because you can't actually see the alt text unless you go into the developer tools in your browser. So not off the top of my head, although as an agency, we kind of work really hard to make sure that our content is all accessible, and particularly on Twitter, which is where we get a lot of our reach, making sure that those image descriptions are there, but none for LinkedIn off the top of my head.
Are there any for any other platforms?
So Instagram in particular, you've got quite a few disabled influencers who absolutely smash it. The Chronic Iconic, Jess, is great, as well as Lucy, I can't remember her surname, but she's got a paralysed leg and matches her canes to every single outfit, which is iconic. Yeah, I think, like Teddy said, it is usually a lot of disabled people who are leading the way because they understand what it's like to not have the access. So giving that to other people.
Yeah, thank you both. Some great examples. And I follow Holly already, but I'm going to go out and do some following after this session. Elijah, question for you now. So in real life opportunities are well and truly back. Festival season is on the horizon. We've got freshers coming at some point. We know when freshers is. We've got freshers, we've got back to school coming. If you are considering attending an event, an in-person event, does accessibility play an important role in your decision making in regards to whether you will or won't go?
Yes, I would say that it does. Personally, I'm nearsighted. And if I know that it's going to be difficult to get, let's say, front row seats at an event, then that plays a role in like whether I want to attend it or not. So basically, it's essential that I bring my glasses with me if I don't expect seating to be a widely accessible thing for me. And on the other hand, though, like if they do have adequate seating that goes to the event, then it's not out of the question of attending it, even if I don't happen to have my glasses on me at the time.
And will you research the event beforehand to find out, for example, the seating, or will you just sort of hope for the best when you attend?
Ideally, I can sort of get an idea of like what the venue is actually like beforehand, but sometimes that's not always accessible, that information.
Okay, so that's a learning in itself, is putting, aside from actually doing it, it's making everyone aware that you're doing it so that they can research and read up on everything beforehand. Thank you. So we've looked at the good. Now we're going to look at the bad. Teddy, are there any brands out there, or brands, maybe brand singular, that's acknowledged its poor accessibility practices, whether digital or in real life, but has learned from its mistakes?
So I'm actually, I'm going to take this question more personally because I can say that I am a brand, and I think that the lessons that I've learned over the years might be helpful for others. It's as I've gone through this, experience creating accessible content, it's the moments when I've been called out for creating unaccessible content. It's never purposeful. There was an admissions video that I did at UC Davis. We just admitted, thousands of students, and there was a photosensitivity issue. Like there was flashing at the very beginning of the video, and called out on it. And we listened, we took the video down and reposted it, which is, just how to handle those types of things when you do things differently. That happens all the time. Content, you can like miss accessibility, and just making sure that you go back and do that, because it's not perfect. And it's just, I would also say that, I am also all on the look. Like most people don't do all text on X, like brands. I went through a few last night, and I was just like really sad that some of them just like didn't have all text. I won't call out any in particular, but it's it's really hard to do, and make sure that you're doing it consistently. And when you do it poorly and getting called out on it, making sure that you like fix whatever you didn't do correctly. So I think that's how I've handled making mistakes along the way.
Thank you for sharing that. And again, like I said to Chloe earlier, it's really interesting and I guess reassuring to hear that we all make mistakes, and it's a constant journey, isn't it? It sounds like it's something that we constantly learn, we constantly have to develop, we constantly have to educate ourselves. It's not just one answer fixes everything. So Chloe, what about you? Any brands that you feel free to call out? We don't shame here.
Obviously going at this from an SEO standpoint, but I remember a talk our previous tech director ran about page speed and sites that had terrible page speed, which is tied quite closely with accessibility and screen readers. And the one he called out was 3, which is the mobile phone service provider. which had a page speed score of 0 out of 100 at the time of looking at it. And I mean, I checked their website earlier today, and it looks a lot better. I don't know if that's entirely tied to accessibility versus SEO and just generally how page load time affects whether or not people buy from your website. I think it's the majority of users abandon a page if it takes longer than 3 seconds to load. So definitely improved.
That's good to hear. Even if it was for the right reasons, but good to hear. And 0 out of 100 must have been snail's pace. That sounds slow.
Yes, pain.
Elijah, what about you? Are there any brands out there whose accessibility practices maybe aren't or weren't that brilliant?
I personally haven't had an experience like that other than I guess circling back to YouTube. They were having problems with uh, keeping those subtitles consistent in all of their videos, and some content creators actually had to go out of their way and like pressure YouTube to sort their subtitle situation out. So at least that's the only thing I can think of.
No, that's a good example. Thank you. And I think TikTok might be similar in that I know they have AI captions, and they are often way off in some very unusual ways sometimes. So yeah, it's people have to manually go in. Thank you for that. So Chloe, we're going to come to you now with a question about SEO, your favorite topic. You touched on it earlier, but just to go into it a little bit more, how are the worlds of SEO and accessibility linked? And have you got any tips for brands starting out on their SEO journey? I know we mentioned accessibility earlier, but their SEO journey.
So the thing that I tell clients and anyone who listens is treat Google like a giant glorified screen reader. It crawls the internet in the exact same way a screen reader does, and it sees the same information. So that's why, like, best practice accessibility things like making sure that your heading tags on a website have a logical structure benefits your SEO as well as accessibility, because your screen readers understand it and Google's crawler, Googlebot, understands it. For brands starting out on their SEO journey, do that. Have a look at your website from the perspective of someone who's never looked at it before, and have a look at the structure and the architecture of it. Does it make sense? If not, can you change it? There's also a lot of helpful resources out there as well, if you're not looking to hire a consultant. If no, why not? But Google's own documentation is often like the best place to start, because it gives you the information straight from the source, even if their algorithm updates are often quite annoying. There's one going out at the moment, and usually they take 2 weeks to roll out. We're on day 47.
Bit more than 2 weeks.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And Teddy, before I go to you for a quick question, just a reminder to anybody out there in the audience to submit your questions, so that we can get around to our panelists in just over 10 minutes. I told you time flies, it's mad. So Teddy, for social media managers and content creators out there, what is best practice when it comes to creating social media content?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really big question that I could spend a couple hours on. But the first thing that I would just tell anybody is to educate yourself. Use that big screen reader Google and search social media accessibility. Higher education websites out there have all sorts of tips. All of the big social media platforms, publishing platforms, they all have the articles out there. But also go not just educating yourself within the social media space and accessibility, but go and read about people's experiences. If you don't have a disability yourself, that is something that's really helped me, reading books, blogs, just about the experiences that the people that need accessibility are going through, so that you have some sort of perspective as you're creating social media content. The other thing that I would say is start small. you're going to have to integrate this. If you're committed to it, you're going to have to integrate this into your social media process. Alt text is probably one of the easiest, lowest hanging fruits that you can start with today. You can do that before you post on Instagram. There's options on X. LinkedIn has all of those options. So start small and then keep adding different accessibility tactics into your posting strategy. Image descriptions can be a part of your captions. They're very similar to alt text, but it's making a pivot to put that into your captions. Just making sure that your videos have captions, places like YouTube, even if it's the worst captioning out there, at least it's there. You can burn in your own captions if you have and know how to do that within your video. So that's where it's like actually a part of your video, or going through uploading SRT files, which you get to edit and make sure that you have all of your information correct. It's just like learning about all of those different things and slowly implementing it until you are as accessible as possible. So sorry, I feel like that was a very long answer, but it's definitely a process.
That was a brilliant answer, thank you. And also, it's a reminder to people out there that this webinar is being recorded and you will be able to watch it. So everything that Teddy and Chloe there were listing, you don't have to frantically take notes. You can go back and kind of checklist your way through it. And also, when you mentioned reading and Googling and all this good stuff, there is a brilliant book that I read recently called Demystifying Disability, and it's absolutely fantastic. I'm not sure if you're both nodding because you've read it, but it's absolutely brilliant. So I totally recommend that for anybody out there who's wanting to learn more. So Elijah, a question for you now, which I will also open to the wider group afterwards. I'm just going to, apologies because I am going to read, I want to get the data right. So I'm going to read from my other screen. So for students with disabilities, Freshers Week can be a really challenging time. It's a challenging time for everyone. And our research, Pioneer Research, has revealed that students with disabilities are twice as likely to feel like nobody cares about them during Freshers Week, and that a quarter of disabled students felt isolated during Freshers Week. How can universities acknowledge and support students with disabilities, both visible and invisible? And also just a reminder that Freshers Week is, of course, the back to school season for those of you in the US. So Elijah, yes, how can universities acknowledge and support students, in your opinion, with disabilities?
Well, the first step is obviously acknowledging that this is a fact, that they are definitely excluded during Freshers Week. One thing that my school does, just as reference, is they provide these recreational activities that are specifically tailored towards the disabled, such as I believe there's some sort of soccer event that's primarily for the disabled. So like having those sorts of opportunities available to them so that they can feel like they're a part of this community, not just like neglected, is very important.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And I love the first point that you made about acknowledging that this is an issue. That is the first step, is talking about it. So thank you very much for that. Teddy, what about you? How can universities acknowledge and support students with disabilities?
Yeah, I mean, I think Elijah hit it on the point. It's building opportunities into those programs for the students with disabilities, but also doing that without segregating them, right? Like if you're not being integrated into the broader community and you want to be, you're still going to feel really isolating. And so I think it's the balance of opportunity and finding other ways and being actively pulling in that diverse group of students throughout all of that programming. And it may also be other things, just like how you're communicating with those students and their families and their supporters, beforehand and after, and the service that is communicating, even like the services that are on campus, just making sure that they have all of that information as they're coming into the college experience. The housing and dining situations, like making sure that those spaces are also accessible for them and they're integrated into the whole experience during that time, that first week or however long it is, so that they feel integrated and welcomed like further into their college career.
Completely, thank you. And a particularly interesting point that I pulled from that there was that it's important to communicate all of this way in advance of Freshers' back to school season, because there's no point someone rocking up on the first day of college or university and then finding out everything that they need to know. Everyone needs this information way in advance so they can, feel comfortable and safe and all this stuff when they start. So that was a great takeaway. Thank you so much. So we've got about 5-ish minutes left of panel questions, and then we'll move to Q&A questions. So a question now, Chloe, I'll go to you first and then I'll go around the group. Have you ever faced or been aware of any inclusivity or accessibility issues in your place of work or your place of education? And if so, what can we learn from that incident?
So pre-working at Blue Array and pre-graduating from university, I worked at a supermarket that I will not name. But at that point, my chronic illness was not diagnosed. I had been in pain since I was 14, and I did not have a reason why, but it did mean that I had issues standing, doing certain things, so I took quite a bit of time off sick. And it got to a point that I'd bought my partner some tickets to go and see a band that he liked, and had a pain flare up that night. So I sat on the floor at the back of the venue while he went and had the time of his life, and then had to call in sick the next day. And I got pulled up and I got a written write-up because I apparently shouldn't have been able to do that if I was in as much pain as I said I was. I was like, do you not realise that I'm in pain all the time? And like what you see is actually my baseline. Since being diagnosed, like that kind of stuff, it's almost like having a little shield, because now I have a reason for not being able to stand up or needing something to walk with. But that's the biggie. I've been very lucky working at Blue Array because I've never had anything like that. And like they're all legends and let me talk about my faulty reproductive system all the time. But yeah, I think it's always about lack of education and thinking that because one condition works some way on one person doesn't mean it's going to be exactly the same for everyone.
Thank you. And it's also that invisible versus visible illness thing, isn't it? Where just because you can't necessarily see something doesn't mean it's not there.
I saw a massive change in attitude towards me when I started using a mobility aid, because it was this physical manifestation of like all of the rubbish going on inside me. It's wild.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And Elijah, what about you? Have you ever been experienced or been aware of any accessibility issues in your place of education?
I would say actually no. They have a lot of opportunities here for people. Example, people with wheelchairs are able to find spots in each of the lecture rooms in order to be properly engaged with the class material. And there's also plenty of opportunities for them to communicate these concerns directly with the university and to have these concerns addressed. So I would say actually no.
That's very good news. And a nice note to finish our main panel, I think, on. We have tons of questions from the audience. We will not get around to all of them, but we will get back to you all. So thank you to everyone for sending in questions. So I will go to Teddy for this one. So this is from Carmen, who says, what would be the 3 questions you would ask about inclusivity and accessibility in a survey to customers? Not to put you on the spot or anything.
That's a great question, Carmen. I think that one of the questions, and I think Chloe or Elijah, please hop in if you have any ideas. I think one of the questions that I would ask is asking about like previous experiences with the brand, understanding if you've ever felt like unincluded or not seen. Like a lot of times representation is a big issue in marketing and communications, and so understanding if they've never like felt represented within the marketing and communications that they've received is something to understand, or if they've ever had issues accessing social media content or the web content. I think understanding from a past perspective. I think that even asking, like, what can we do better? Giving that people the opportunity to just to tell you how to do better. That gives you an opportunity to listen and do something. And as you start to see trends, you'll be able to integrate those into your work. So I think those are the two things that popped up right now for me.
Thank you very much. And Chloe and Elijah, do you have anything to add in there? Nope. All good. Thank you very much then, Teddy. So Elijah, a question for you now. Sean has said, I agree with Elijah, it's so important to have more information available about venues for so many different kinds of people / needs. Have the panel got any examples of venues that are doing this well? So Elijah, have you got any examples of venues that are, their websites, for example, their FAQs, their information is great?
I would say, I think this is, at least in my experience, going to places like I've gone to like concerts before, and they tell you like specifically which seats are available prior to you going there. So rather than making the event like just first come first serve, having uh, the that information available online for people is probably what I would suggest.
Thank you. And Chloe, I know that you're a big gig goer. Are there any venues out there that are really getting their information out there in a really good way?
Not necessarily for gigs. I don't go to many that have decent accessibility, to be honest. I've been to some stadium shows where like it's been on a football pitch and they let me go down the tunnel to use the accessible loo instead of going up the steps, which is nice. But actually a big one is the Brighton Conference Centre. Go to quite a few conferences there, and the information that's presented is so useful. You don't have to ask, although a lot of the time if you are buying a ticket or attending a conference there, you have the option to request the information when you get your ticket. And it's just like their entire team has had equality, diversity and inclusion training. Like they're all brilliant. So that's probably my gold standard, to be honest.
Amazing. Big tick for the Brighton Conference Centre. Thank you. So Teddy, a question here from Bethan, who says, in what ways can brands use their influence to advocate for greater accessibility and inclusivity in society as a whole?
I'm just reading the question as well. What ways can brands use influence to advocate for greater accessibility and inclusivity in society as a whole? I mean, I think when Elijah first started talking, he talked about it's like our civic responsibility, and going back to the brand's values. And so I think that there's a lot of ways to win if you champion inclusivity and accessibility. Hopefully I'm answering this question. If you decide that your brand is going to be the best in this, one, you're going to be a leader in this space. And that's going to help your brand reputation, and it's going to help the people that need accessible technique or accessibility across your content that need and want or looking for inclusivity. So I think that as you become a champion of these different things, you're going to become a leader in the space, and then you're also you're doing your civic responsibility and you're helping society change because you have the influence to do that. Like if you are a bigger brand, then what you say people are going to start to follow and listen to, and you're able to like set the precedent, and there's a lot of power in that.
Amazing. Fantastic answer. Thank you so much. So another question now from the perfume shop, who say, once we've implemented these accessibility initiatives, how can we effectively promote our achievements in this area to our target audience, particularly Gen Z, to highlight our commitment to accessibility and inclusivity in a genuine and authentic way? So just to paraphrase a little bit, Elijah, in your opinion, how can a brand be accessible and inclusive in a way that is authentic? In a way that is authentic.
I would say like not trying too hard to like put themselves in like that positive light, if that makes sense. So like not I'd say just like making these accessibility making your event or brand more accessible is kind of already answering that question. Just making sure that those opportunities are available is already enough, in my opinion, to show that your brand is willing to adjust and adapt for other people. So I would say, yeah, just to like not trying too hard to like put yourself in like a higher position, I'd say, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Chloe, do you have anything to add to that?
I think it's a very hard to acquire skill that's like bigging yourself up in an authentic way. I think it's quite difficult to try and like shout about all of the cool things you're doing in a way that's legitimate and comes across to your users as someone who actually cares about these things. There are ways you can go about it. I know quite a few clients of mine have dedicated accessibility centres on their website. So, like a hub explaining the work that they've done to make the site accessible. Even my clients don't do this, but even having a plan outlined in terms of your aims for the next year, next quarter, in terms of we're going to add alt text to 75% of our product images by X date, for example. I think then as internal in-house marketers make case studies, talk about all of the hard work that you have done and don't necessarily position it as coming from the brand, because I think there's a very thin line between good brand social media marketing and very cringe brand social media marketing. So you want to make sure that you're towing that line as well as you can, I think.
Thank you. And Teddy was going, yes. Thank you. So I think we've got time for one more quick question. So this one is, as someone who doesn't belong to a typical accessibility profile, how can I effectively empathize and put myself in the shoes of a user with disabilities or other diverse needs when auditing a website? In other words, how can I ensure that I'm considering perspectives and experiences outside of my own whilst evaluating the accessibility of a website? So Chloe, I'll go to you first, and then Teddy, I'll come to you afterwards.
Depending on what tools you've got available, some of the out-of-the-box things like Google Analytics 4 can be quite useful for auditing, things like that. As well as site crawlers, particularly Sitebulb has an accessibility audit feature, which looks at a site from a totally neutral perspective and just goes, alt text missing here, generic anchor text here. Like if you're using click here as a bit an anchor for a link, then that's just going to get flagged. I think using those tools means that you can almost neutralize your own perspective and get an idea of, from a totally third-party perspective, what's our website missing. Alongside that, like we spoke about earlier, reading stuff from disabled people, just digesting as much information as you can to understand what people's difficulties are when using social media, surfing the web, accessing venues, all of that kind of stuff.
Thank you. Some great advice. And finally, Teddy, what about you? How can people ensure that they're considering perspectives and experiences outside of their own?
Yeah, I think Chloe nailed it. I think the reading is a big part of it. You know, if you have, paying attention to when people do talk to you about it, and not necessarily going and seeking out conversations because that might be awkward or strange for that person, but just being more aware of all of those things that we've talked about this entire hour that are around you. The more that you're aware of it, the better you're going to be at implementing it. And the other thing, one of the most humbling experiences I've ever done is I've sent my own social media content through screen readers. And I mean, some of it was, at the beginning, it was laughable. So like, I kid you not, go put your phone, go put your computer in the screen reader mode. If you have a Mac, it's just already built in. It may not be the best one, but go and, you're able to experience the same thing with those with disabilities just by like turning on a different tool, a different setting. So, even I had a I was out for medical leave and I've not been able to pick up 15 pounds. So I've been very aware of the things that I can and can't do, like opening doors and like when it so just being like aware of those things that might start to relate to people with different or with people with disabilities that might also be experiencing.
Thank you so much. So we're bang on time, pretty much. We have a few leftover audience questions, but to those who didn't get their questions answered, we will get back to you. So do not worry about getting your questions answered. Thank you so much, panelists. You have been absolutely sensational. Thank you so much. This has been a total joy to host, so thank you. Be sure to everyone out there, be sure to check out our 2 free downloadable assets that should be on your screen. So we've got our Gen Z glossary and also our accessibility checklist. So get on that now. And then you can also secure your free tickets to our youth marketing event, YMS. And you can find your link in the additional resources box along with our downloadable assets. So to be sure to click on that so that we can see you in June. Thank you very much, panelists. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. And we will see you next time. Thank you very much, everyone.